Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 38th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man, Brand New Day. Now, before we actually get to talking about the MCU, I want to talk about Spider-Man for a little bit. No duh. So, here's a little thing with Spider-Man. I did not think that the next time I'd be talking about the webhead would be with an MCU movie. So, to kind of get into my own channel for a little bit, I do actually have a new vlog series that I have planned to do at some point in the future. And basically, it's going to be a vlog series that's going to be centered on all the non-MCU Spider-Man movies. Think the Sam Raimi trilogy, the Amazing Duology, and yes, even the Spider-Verse movies. I had planned to do them after I finished Xiaolin Showdown, and if things had gone according to plan, they'd be over right now. So, why didn't I do them? Well, it's because Beyond the Spider-Verse didn't come out. Yeah, it's a weird little thing. I wanted to do all of the non-MCU Spider-Man films including the Spider-Verse trilogy. But unfortunately, Beyond the Spider-Verse got delayed, and as a result of that, I kind of decided I wanted to wait. I could have still done it, but then I'd be doing what I do with the MCU movies, wherein I do a new vlog every time a new movie is released, which I do like doing that for the MCU films because it's kind of a nice change of pace to just take a break from my regular vlog and go back to talking about the MCU and all the superhero shenanigans that goes on there. But yeah, I won't lie, sometimes it can get a little crowded. When I was doing the Sony edition of the MCU Perspectives, it kind of put more stuff packed into the year, and I admit it did get to me a little bit. Not to the point where I hated doing it. I still enjoyed doing those vlogs, even though the films were in the Sonyverse were mixed, to say the least. But it still was a lot packed in. And yeah, sometimes I do need a break, and I do want to focus on my regular vlogs every now and then. So I just decided to push the non-MCU Spider-Man vlog back until at least Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out. And well, the current vlog is Jimmy Neutron now, so what can you do? But with that all in mind, that does not mean that Spider-Man is neglected in the film world. So when it came down to Brand New Day, this is a film that I wouldn't say excited for. I was looking forward to it, is the best way to put it. But when it comes down to the MCU, Spider-Man projects tend to be the outliers on what fits into the grander picture. Mostly because, well, Marvel technically still doesn't own the film rights to Spider-Man. Sony still has the film rights to the webhead. And the only reason that he appears in the MCU is because Marvel and Sony have basically collaborated and have decided to let each other play with each other's toys. And thus, Spider-Man can be in the MCU. But on top of that, when it came down to Spider-Man in the films, well, I felt No Way Home kind of topped it. Even when I did learn that there was a new Spider-Man film coming out called Spider-Man Brand New Day, I didn't look at that and go, oh my god, this is going to be great, it's a new Spider-Man movie. I thought, oh cool, a new Spider-Man movie. I can't wait to see that. And that was pretty much it. All the reveals, everything going on, it was basically just like, okay, that's cool. I didn't get as excited or hyped as everybody else was when this movie. That didn't mean I wasn't looking forward to it. It's just at the same time, I wasn't as all hyped as everyone else was when it came to this movie. Again, that does not mean that I wasn't looking forward to seeing it. I love the Webhead. He's one of my favorite superheroes of all time. I did a vlog series on a short-lived MTV series, and I just told you that I'm planning to do another vlog series focusing on all the non-MCU Spider-Man movies. So clearly, the Webhead must have some kind of a hold over me. Plus, I did that Spider-Verse vlog that I canceled because it was too draining. But my point is this. I do enjoy the webhead, and I was excited to see the movie. I just wasn't as hyped as everyone else. But when I did end up seeing the trailers for Brand New Day, I was a little bit more interested, especially since Brand New Day did seem to be adapting another Spider-Man story, namely Spider-Man, The Other or Die. Now, I do own the comic. I haven't sat down and read it yet, but I do know what happens in it. Basically, what happens in The Other or Die is that Peter is dying as a result of the irradiation from the initial spider bite, and And before he officially kicks the bucket, he's attacked by the interdimensional vampire known as Morlun, who basically wants to wipe Spider-Man out before he dies so he can absorb his life force. He nearly does that. He only gets foiled thanks to the citizens of New York. Spidey is sent to a hospital, and when Morlun goes in to try and finish him off, Spidey suddenly goes feral and eats him alive. And it turns out the reason why Spidey's changed is because the spider half of his DNA is evolving. And as a result, he ends up playing host to this unique spider entity in the multiverse called the Other, that basically tells Spidey that he needs to accept the spider half of his genealogy, which in turn allows him to accept the Other and basically makes him reborn good as new. He has his life back, he has his powers back, and they're actually much improved, with him getting new abilities like spikes, being stronger, and organic web shooters. He doesn't keep them. He doesn't play host to the Other forever. In fact, to my knowledge, the last Spidey in the multiverse who played host to the Other was the Peter Parker from the MCU universe. So it's kind of out there. But I was interested in seeing what they would do with this movie. And I will not lie, the trailers further hyped me up a little bit because, well, they weren't showing us who the villain was. I mean, we were getting hints here and there, as the villain seemed to be some kind of ethereal entity that seemed to be able to jump from body to body, but we never actually saw who the villain was. Now, my guess was that it was Morlun. Like I said, this movie was an adaptation of the Other, so I thought maybe they're doing a new twist on Morlun. Maybe have it be that he's like a literal entity that can jump from body to body. I thought that would be pretty damn cool if that was what they were doing. But I was wrong. That was not who the villain was in the movie. Who is the villain? Well, I'll wait till the plot summary to reveal that. But needless to say, I didn't see it coming. The point is, I was invested in seeing this movie, and the more I saw about it, the more I was interested in it. Again, I wasn't as hyped as everyone else, but I was still excited to see this film and basically see how the Webhead's journey in the MCU continued after the bombastic fest that was No Way Home. But with all that said, the film has been out in theaters for 2 weeks, and I have already seen it once, and I enjoyed it the first time, but do I think it still holds up? Well, let's talk about it and find out as we get to looking at Spider-Man Brand New Day. And before I get into the long-ass plot summary, 2 things. 1, I did take notes when seeing this movie, and while I'm able to mostly get through a vlog without having to rely on these things, there will be a couple times when I do open it up and peruse, so you're going to be just seeing me staring at these notes for maybe a few seconds before I find the specific entry that I wanted to. So I'm just giving you a heads up that will occasionally happen. On top of that, spoilers are inbound. Like I said, this film has been out in theaters for 2 weeks at the time that I'm doing this vlog. So if you haven't seen this film yet and want to go in unspoiled, turn away now, because I'm spoiling the plot rotten. Are we good? Okay. With all that out of the way, long-ass plot summary. So, what's going on in this movie? Well, basically, ever since we last saw Spider-Man in the MCU, he's just been doing his Spider-Man thing. For 4 years, Spider-Man has been swinging around New York just, kicking ass, taking names, fighting supervillains, and basically becoming a celebrity. Yeah, it's clear that whatever mire that Mysterio was able to drench him with after Far From Home, he's been able to shake it off, and, well, New York loves him. And he's been able to take on a lot of big-name supervillains as a result, including some of the villains from his personal rogues gallery, some of which include the street-level indestructible bad guy known as Tombstone, the Scorpion, which, yeah, we're wrapping up that loose plot thread from Homecoming, as the Scorpion is now fully decked out in his armor with the scorpion tail and everything, and Spider-Man even managed to take down the superpowered ninja clan known as the Hand, which feels like it should be in Daredevil's territory, but whatever, they're both Marvel properties. Point is, everyone loves Spider-Man, the city loves him, he wound up getting the key to the city from the mayor once, he's on top of the world. Too bad Peter Parker's not doing so well. Yeah, while Spider-Man is definitely excelling in the crime-fighting world, Peter Parker socially is falling further and further down the ladder, as Peter has basically gone out of his way to become a non-person, even more so than he did at the end of No Way Home, as he still lives in his shitty little ramshackle apartment that we saw him in at the end of that movie, and he avoids social interaction like the plague. Case in point, one night when he comes home, he runs into a girl who clearly is a little interested in him and said, "Oh, I guess we're on the same floor," and Peter just like, "Yeah," and then intentionally avoids her until she goes away, at which point he changes apartments and ends up living on the top floor, which is basically just a storage area filled with asbestos. And so and on top of that, the closest that we see to Peter actually socially interacting with people is him internet stalking Ned and MJ, as they're still living their lives happily, and, well, they got into MIT, they're able to do all their courses, and they're actually moving on to bigger and better things, and they're still close friends. But unfortunately, because of what happened at the end of No Way Home, Peter can't be a part of any of that. He can't talk to them, and, well, he just thinks that they're better off without him. So, yeah, Peter is just not doing so well. He's outwardly, he's excitable, he's the hero everyone wants, but privately, he's a depressed little mess who basically is just shutting out the world. It is rather sad. But there is one other bit of social interaction that he gets in the form of a police captain by the name of Jean DeWolf, who kind of is Spidey's go-to lady on the police force, as he has her personal phone number and they talk with each other, exchange information, and all that nice jazz. And we even see Peter briefly talk to her as we see him just walking around New York in his civilian garb as they're talking about I think the latest crime families that have been running around New York. And another thing that we've been seeing Peter do as part of his regular routine, he drops flowers off in Aunt May's grave, which, yeah, someone who lost a family member, I can honestly feel that. Love you, Mom. But either way, going back to Peter talking with Jean DeWolf in his civilian garb, as they're chatting, Jean is kind of trying to talk to Spidey about, having a life outside of crime fighting. Because, well, like I said, Peter has dedicated more time to being Spider-Man than he has to being Peter Parker. And while Jean, of course, doesn't know who he is behind the mask, nobody does. It defeats the whole anonymous superhero thing, and he even says a variant of that line at some point in the movie. Well, Peter doesn't really see the point of it. He's Spider-Man. He's always on top of everything. He's got to be fighting and protecting New York, blah-blah-blah-blah-blah. But Jean thinks it's unhealthy, especially since Peter has reported that he's been feeling some aches and pains lately. Some headaches. He's been feeling pains in his wrist. It's just something weird is going on with him, but Peter can't quite figure out what. However, all those thoughts are put on hold as Peter gets an alert on his crime radar that there seems to be something going on. That seems to be something going on in New York. Specifically, a Humvee is making its way right down the center of New York and is basically shooting at anyone that gets close. So Peter decides he's going to go deal with it as he slips into his Spidey jammies and swings into New York to fight it off. And yeah, this thing is just going haywire as it's just swerving around everywhere, shooting at all the cars. And while Spidey is able to disarm it and manage to break off a wheel, things are still not going well, especially when a new player enters the fray. Frank Castle, a.k.a. the Punisher, and yeah, I'm not really as familiar with Frank Castle in the MCU. Not because, actually, entirely because I'm not that big a fan of the Punisher. Yeah, I'm really not. I will admit that I did start watching the shows in the Disney Plus MCU shows that did tie into the Punisher, including some of season 1 of Daredevil Born Again, and I'm still planning to watch the rest of it because why not? I do kind of like being caught up for these movies, and I'm kind of mad at myself for not being completely caught up by the time I did this vlog, but I'm just gonna be honest here. I don't really give a shit about the Punisher. Yeah, I'm not a fan of him. I'm not a big fan of him. Now, I'm not saying he's an awful character, and if you're a fan of him, good on you. Continue enjoying him. I just don't see the appeal of him. He's a pissed-off guy with a lot of guns, and he's just a general dickwad. If I can give some positives about him, it's that he's fully aware of what he is and actively encourages people not to see him as a role model because, hey, he's a psychotic weirdo with a skull on his chest who shoots criminals and basically is just a monster. So, hey, that's a positive trait. But that's it. Look, when I go into superheroes, I'm here for the flashy stuff. There's a reason why Spider-Man is one of my favorite superheroes. There is a reason why I still enjoy doing these vlogs, because it's about the flashy guys in weird in multicolored underwear. I will watch that shit. The Punisher, not so much. Not a big fan of him. Now, I will say that if he gets his own MCU movie, I'll do a vlog in it like I will everything else. Just don't expect me to go in all excited like any other MCU film. Are we good? Okay. Now that I've pissed off a good chunk of you, what's Frank doing here? Well, giant Humvee just barreling through New York. He's basically here to try and deal with whatever scumbag is there. But Peter is not really in the mood to deal with him. As during the chase he gets blasted on, he ends up on the hood of Frank's car, and when Frank tries to shoot him off, Spidey ends up taking one of his guns and webs it to the top of his car, and then Frank turns a rocket launcher on Pete. With Pete retaliating by basically leaping at Frank's car and kicking him right out of it. So hey, he's out for the count. But as for Peter, he manages to chase back after the Humvee, and Captain DeWolf gets in contact with him and lets him know that the Humvee is actually heading for a facility owned by Damage Control, the company that Tony Stark set up that's supposed to be, dealing with cleanup after all the superhero battles. And it turns out the specific the Damage Control facility that this Humvee is crashing into is one where they house super criminals. One of which, of course, is one that Spidey put in there, the Scorpion, as he's being transferred to a new facility, and, well, they're kind of in a hurry to get him out of there since, Humvee barreling down on them. Unfortunately, Spidey is not able to stop the Humvee as it crashes right through the wall of a building and ends up crashing right into where all the cells are. As such, a bunch of Damage Control officers arrive on the scene and start pointing their guns at the tank, and Spidey swings in to figure out who it is, and as he rips it open, he finds the person that's in charge of the tank is an old lady. Odd choice for a new Spider-Man rogue, but hey, what do I know? But, okay. It's not really an old lady. Well, okay, it is, but the person in the driver's seat is not the person you think it is. As when Spidey has this person cornered, the old lady seems to convulse, and then a guard behind Spidey seems to convulse for a little bit. And the old lady starts wondering, where the hell is she? At which point, Spidey's spider sense alerts him to wherever this presence is, and he ends up webbing up the guard's feet, and even the guard's like, you can see me. At which point, whatever this thing is seems to jump from the guard to someone else higher up, and yeah, everyone starts panicking as everyone's trying to figure out what the hell's going on. As such, whatever this thing is ends up running off with Spidey chasing after it, but whenever Spidey gets close, this thing seems to jump from body to body until it runs up to the roof of the Damage Control building where Matt Gargan, aka the Scorpion, is being transported on a helicopter. And unfortunately, this presence manages to get to one of the guards that's transporting Mac, who in turn gives the helicopter pilot a new destination to drop the Scorpion off at, which is Bellevue. As such, the helicopter pilot ends up taking off with Scorpion, while Spidey does manage to get to the roof. Well, whatever this presence is has put the guard on the edge of the building and basically says, "Hey, Spidey, come save me." At which point, when it falls off, Spidey webs the guard, pulls him back, and then webs him to the side of the building. At which point, Spidey wants to know who the hell this person is, and, well, the thing retaliates by deciding to try to jump into Spidey's head. And for a brief second, we do see an image of what's going on up there, as we see Peter in his Spidey jammies, as it looks like he's in an apartment with a double-decker bed, and Aunt May comes in to talk to him. But that's all we really manage to see, where Spidey ends up throwing this thing right out of his mind back into the body. And this thing basically looks at Spidey like, wait, you threw me out. How did you do that? But yeah, Peter wants to know what the hell this thing is and what it's doing, but this thing retaliates by saying, those are not the questions you should be asking. What you should really be asking is, what was in the Humvee I brought? At which point we cut back to the Humvee, and it turns out that whatever this presence is, it placed a bomb that immediately goes off. As such, in all the commotion, whatever this thing is immediately vacates the guard's body, and he's just as clueless as everyone else that's worn it. As such, cleanup is immediately in order, as thankfully there was nobody in the Damage Control as everyone retreated when everything was going to hell. And so EMTs and other social workers come in, and all of them just try to, clean everything up, with them even taking the guard away, with the guard apologizing to Spider-Man for doing all those things, because he would never normally do all those things. He loves Spider-Man, yada yada, fanboy stuff. But ultimately, after he's hauled away, Spidey meets up with Captain DeWolf, and basically they wind up questioning the old lady that was in the tank earlier, and it turns out she's just a janitor. She worked at Damage Control, and for whatever reason, she seemed to go apeshit. And ultimately, Captain DeWolf's working theory is that somehow Scorpion managed to get to this woman and basically made a deal with her in order to break him out. But Spidey does not think that's the case, because after all, he knows that whatever this thing is, it seemed to be jumping from body to body, but even that doesn't really give him enough information to work with. As such, Spidey decides that if this thing is somehow mental, then maybe he needs to talk to someone And as such, he leaves the Wolf as he goes to find this contact, and well, we cut to him going to a bathhouse or spa or one of the two. I do not know. Point is, there's a lobby, and when he arrives there, someone gives him a towel. And when Peter goes in, we soon see who his contact is. Yelena Pavlova, aka the new Black Widow, and currently a member of the New Avengers. And we see her as she's basically just chillaxing in a little hot tub or pool or whatever it is. Point is, she's just chill. and possibly naked in there. I don't know. We only see her from the shoulders up. She could be wearing a bathing suit, but the movie doesn't really doesn't really give us any details about that. So, knowing Yelena, it could be either or, and I'm not going to ask any more questions. Although before she meets with Spidey, she tells him he needs to undress and join her because, well, for one thing, it'll help him relax and unwind. For another thing, she needs to know that he's not carrying any weapons. And so Spider-Man complies. He strips down to his skivvies with the only remnant of his suit that he keeps on being his mask, because again, anonymous superhero. As such, Peter talks with Yelena and asks if she knows anything, he basically asks her about whatever this presence is and tells her about how it seemed to jump from body to body, and if it seems to be like mind control, like what Yelena went through in the Red Room or what other members of the New Avengers have gone through. But Yelena just immediately writes it off. What Peter described doesn't sound like mind control. It sounds more like just straight up possession. On top of that, it turns out that this attack on the damage control facility was not the most recent one. There have been, actually it is the most recent one, but there have been others like it. At least 4 other facilities in damage control have been attacked in the last month, and following each of those attacks, a number of damage control workers seem to be hit with some kind of psychological attack, as all these different employees all went through damage control servers and were searching for something called VMAX. Though clearly whatever VMAX is, they didn't find it because it continued on and on. As such, Peter asks Yelena if she knows anything about that, but Yelena says that she really doesn't because, well, for one thing, damage control is not her purview, and whatever this is, it's in Spider-Man's neck of the woods. The New Avengers aren't going to go for that. They go for big potato stuff. This is small potato stuff. So that's in Spider-Man's neighborhood. As such, Peter decides, fuck it, then I'll just go ask damage control myself, and thus he leaves, and he heads over to damage control, as, yeah, he is a friend of them. Although when he arrives there, it turns out damage control has upped their security considerably, as when Spider-Man goes in, he's put through a scanner that scans his biology, his enhanced abilities, and while he is nearly gunned down because he refused to take off his mask, the head of this part of damage control ends up vouching for him, and this asshole's name is Bill Metzger. Bill Metzger. I'm sorry if I have to refer to the notes again. I kind of don't remember his name. It's kind of a generic one. But yeah, Bill actually does seem to be a friend of Spidey's, or at the very least, he thinks that Spidey's a good. He at the very least, he's vouching for him. As Bill takes Spidey and takes him on a tour through damage control, and they seem to be doing rather well. Everyone's thriving, and it turns out that damage control has kind of upped its game in the last few years. As it turns out, they not only just collect material from supervillain battles and so forth, but they've also been, well, for lack of a better word, appropriating it, as they've been utilizing the technology and basically trying to rework into something, beneficial to mankind. Well, one example being that when Spidey peeks in on one of their labs, he sees that some of the damage control scientists are working with the Shocker's shock gloves from Homecoming, which I kind of like. On top of that, when Peter walks through, he runs into the Hand. Yeah, they work for damage control now. As Bill's claims that they were basically just misguided kids that needed direction, and so he employed them at damage control so that they could, just find a direction in life. Hold on, I need a drink. I'm thirsty, sue me. But ultimately, Spidey ends up meeting with Bill in his office, and Spidey begins asking Bill about all the stuff that's been going on with damage control, about all the attacks they've been going through, about how someone's been looking for something, and he wonders if Bill knows anything about that. But Bill is admittedly clueless. He doesn't know who's been attacking their facilities, but he did see Spider-Man through the security feed of the latest attack, and he is aware that whatever this thing is, it seems to be an invisible force that only Spider-Man seems to be able to sense. And as such, Bill basically tasks Spider-Man with finding whatever the hell is the cause of all this and putting an end to it, because whatever this entity is, Bill doesn't want it getting its hands on anything in damage control, because again, damage control handles some very dangerous tech, and if that falls into the wrong hands, it could mean the end of everything. But Spidey even citing a vault that's nearby Bill's office, and stating that maybe whatever the thing is, it's looking for what it's looking for is in that vault. But either way, Spidey promises Bill that he will keep an eye on it, and he will try to take care of it. Before he leaves, he asks Bill if he knows anything about something called VMAX, and Bill just kind of shrugs his shoulders and says, no, I've never heard of that before. And so, as such, Spidey just goes, okay, whatever. And so he leaves, with him even calling Captain DeWolf later when he's back in his civilian garb, and stating that Bill seemed to be just as clueless about all this as he was. Either way, Peter and DeWolf are going to try and keep their eyes off of the Scorpion, because, yeah, when he got dropped off at Bellevue, he did escape. And so Spidey's utilizing various illegal means, including hacking the city surveillance cameras, is trying to keep an eye out for Scorpion. However, as Peter is talking with Captain DeWolf, he enters a bodega where he normally gets Aunt May's flowers, and he sees a familiar face. Ned Leeds, who is there basically buying a couple little mini kegs. Why? Because he and MJ moved into an apartment in New York, and, well, they're doing a housewarming event. As such, Peter sees Ned as he's talking with the lady at the front, as he's trying to tell her that if he tries to buy a specific energy drink, not to sell it to him because he's addicted to the stuff and it could kill him if he has too much of it. Before he then proceeds to buy 2 bottles of the stuff. And as Ned leaves with this little mini kegs, Pete, feeling nostalgic and wanting to make sure his friend is okay, ends up following him as Ned leads him back to the apartment building he and MJ are living in. Because, yeah, Ned and MJ are roommates. Which I probably said already. I repeat things right after I say them. It happens a lot. I am an idiot, as you are most likely aware. But anyway, Peter goes inside and basically crashes the housewarming party, as it's just full of people. And as such, he wanders around just kind of doing his own thing until he eventually makes his way to a back room where this is clearly Ned's office, I'm going to call it, as it's got a bunch of stuff lying around, some tech stuff, and an entire wall of Spider-Man sightings, as... yeah, it turns out that while Ned may not remember who is behind the mask or even spending time with Peter, he does remember Spider-Man in all the years in the previous films. And Spider-Man's been a big part of his life. He's saved his life multiple times. He's been a hero, and well, it turns out Ned's been keeping an eye on Spider-Man because he wants to find out who he is, not because he wants to expose him or anything. He just wants to thank him for everything, which Ned tells Peter as he catches Peter in the back spot looking at his Spidey wall, and the two of them have a nice little friendly moment as Peter is happy that Ned is living a good life. And it turns out that Ned even goes one step further with his Spidey tracking, as he has an app for that. Yeah, he has an app called Spidey Tracker, and basically what this thing does is that it just, well, notes any recent appearances of the webhead. And so Peter thinks, oh, that's cool, and because he's apparently aware of the app. But as he and Ned are talking, MJ peeks in, and yeah, it's just as awkward for Peter as you would expect it to be, as he really doesn't know how to react to MJ. But he's trying to stay positive and friendly as he gives him the flowers as a housewarming gift, and MJ is thankful for that, saying that Peter's a friendly neighbor, at which point she leaves with Ned following after. As such, Peter does kind of follow them, though he stays a bit away as MJ puts the flowers in a vase, and they talk about a job interview that MJ went to where she did get the job and then subsequently turned it down because she doesn't want to work for a big mega corporation. But as everything's going on, MJ's new boyfriend comes in, who I swear to God is Flash Thompson. I may not be... okay, tell me if I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm just being racist here, because it looks like she's dating Flash fucking Thompson. You know, the jackass that made Peter's life a living hell even in the MCU? I don't know. I don't know. Am I racist here? Is that a different guy altogether? I have no idea. I'm just kind of wondering to myself, did Flash have character development since we last saw him? Because in No Way Home, he was still an asshole. What would compel MJ to want to date Flash? Yeah, I'm curious is all I'm saying. But, whatever. Apparently MJ and Flash are an item, and so, as Ned leaves, it turns out MJ managed to get one of those energy drinks off him because, well, they're worried about him. But MJ and Flash have a moment, well, if it is Flash, and they kiss. And yeah, this shakes Peter up something fierce as he decides to make himself scarce and leave the party, partying through the crowd until he eventually just runs outside and swings away, not even bothering to don his Spidey jammies. As he swings through New York, it's raining out, he's just sad and angry as he remembers all the intimate moments he and MJ shared, but it gets worse. As when Peter gets back to his apartment, he starts shaking. He starts feeling off. Like something is just physically wrong with him as his wrists are trembling, he has a headache, and his eyes go black, like completely opaque. And he ends up collapsing right there in the apartment. From there, we actually do have another dream with him and Aunt May as we get an extension on what's going on as Aunt May comes to talk to him about and talks to him about change and how it can be scary, and Peter knows that. And Aunt May says, I don't think you do, but before we can get more clarity on that, Peter wakes up. Only he's not in the apartment anymore. He's hanging from the underside. He's hanging outside the apartment, specifically on like the underside of the roof with, you know, the little brick dividers, whatever. Point is, he's hanging on the underside of that in a web cocoon, and he's wearing nothing but his skivvies. And Peter's wondering what the hell is going on. And as the web cocoon begins breaking apart, he almost falls to his death as he's not wearing his web shooters until he actually shoots a web right out of his hand, which even he's shocked by. Now, ultimately, he still has a crack. He ends up still falling down below as he still loses footing and basically gets banged up, but good. But he seems to be in one piece. After that, Peter ends up sneaking back into the hotel via the laundry chute, even just picking up random girls' clothes so that he can clothe himself. And when he gets back to his apartment, he finds that the entire place is covered in webbing. So clearly, Peter was a little active while he was out of it. As such, Peter wants to know what is going on with him, and this is something I forgot to mention. Peter's got an AI assistant now. As part of his whole build as Spider-Man is that he's got a little computer tech set up in his apartment. And so what he does is that basically the AI is called Evie, and her job is basically to monitor Peter's conditions, and she typically is on the HUD display in his mask, which actually, if I can go on a brief tangent here, which has nothing to do with the plot, I actually really like Spider-Man's costume in this movie. Of course, it's still the traditional red and blue that we come to associate with Spider-Man. It has all the typical design tropes you'd see with him, but quite frankly, I love it. It's a great... you could click, like... Something that describe the way that this current costume was described after No Way Home was that it was clearly inspired by Peter's brothers, i.e. his counterparts from the Sam Raimi trilogy and the Amazing Duology, and you could see those design flourishes in there, from the design on the spider, from the layout of the web, and the mixing of the blue. I like that. You can clearly see the inspirations from from Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. I like that. It's really nice, and I think it's just a quaint little costume. But anyway, back on topic. So Peter asks Evie what the hell's going on, and Evie ends up doing a diagnostic on Peter's biology, and it turns out that his spider side, it's changing. His spider hormones and genetics seem to be altering, getting higher. Basically, his entire body underwent a complete metamorphosis as Peter's powers have now been supercharged. Like I said, he has the organic web shooters as well, but he's now a lot more agile, a lot stronger, and his spidey senses have also been amplified to the nth degree, to the point where when he goes out onto the roof of his apartment building, he can barely hold himself together because everything seems to just overwhelm him as everything in the city nearly knocks him out. And while he's able to calm down and filter through everything, it's still a lot for him to bear. Unfortunately, though, these new powers are not easy to get used to, as while he does try to get around the organic web shooters, because they don't always seem to work, by still wearing his regular web shooters, unfortunately the two can't coexist, as when Peter tries to shoot web with the regular web shooters, they do work, only for the organic web shooters to burst right through and destroy them. So, yeah, if Peter wants to swing around New York, he's got to settle for the organic web shooters, which, again, don't really seem to work. And combined with Peter not being able to fully control his strength and agility, he's clearly not in his element. Now, ultimately, Peter does try to figure out how these new abilities operate, as he does try swinging around New York, and as he does go up, like I said, he goes to the top of his apartment building and trying out his new abilities, and what I love, too, is that he even presses the spinner out on his arm, and it leaves out a little goo thing that's supposed to be the web. It's suitably gross, but I love it. But as Peter is testing all this, and, well, getting banged up as a result, the HUD on his mask goes off as it turns out a new crime alert's been going on. Specifically, another damage control facility has been attacked, this time by the Scorpion. So hey, Peter now knows where he is. As such, with great difficulty, Peter swings his way across New York to where the Scorpion is, and yeah, it's clear the Scorpion is no longer in the driver's seat, as the Scorpion is attacking various damage control officers, and he's basically telling them, he's asking them, what do you know about something called VMAX? And again, nobody's telling the Scorpion anything, because nobody knows anything. As by the time Peter arrives on the scene, and again, bangs into a few places as a result, he tells the Scorpion that maybe they shouldn't be doing this, he's not having a rough day, only for the Scorpion to respond, "You think I'm Scorpion?" Yeah, like I said, if you can't tell, it's whatever this presence is. The thing that's been able to jump from body to body. And it's clear that a side effect of Peter still adjusting to his new senses is that he can no longer sense whatever this presence is. So, well, yeah, he can't tell that the person currently in Scorpion is not Scorpion. As such, Peter tries fighting the possessed Scorpion, but again, because he's not fully understanding his abilities, he starts getting his ass whooped. And even though Peter tries to ask this thing whatever it wants, it's not giving him any answers. And the battle almost results in Peter getting the Scorpion stinger right through his fucking head, only for Peter's spider instincts to take over. His eyes go black. And it's like Peter goes full feral, as he actually manages to overpower the Scorpion and begins just tossing him around, not even bothering to hold back. As he throws the Scorpion to the ground, demands the presence tell him who it is and what it wants, but it's still not talking. And in response, Peter grabs the Scorpion by the tail and begins just slamming around like a fucking rag doll, even to the point where he ends up smacking him into a police car that's on the scene, causing it to crash. And as such, Peter continues kicking the Scorpion's ass, and at one point nearly kills him. But ultimately, the only reason he doesn't is because he ends up webbing the Scorpion up, and this presence ends up abandoning Mac's body. And as such, as Peter starts calming down, Captain Wolf arrives on the scene, and she begins tasking Spidey, what the hell? Because he was a lot more violent than usual. And going back to that police car he knocked the Scorpion into, the officers inside were injured, not killed, but they're basically in a condition where they really should not be moved around that much. As such, when Peter sees the injured cop, he comes down as the spider instincts leave him, and Peter ends up asking, "Oh my God, is that officer okay? I need to help." But the wolf pushes him back as she tells him that whatever is going on with him, he needs to get it under control but if something like this happens again, she can't protect him because he nearly killed a cop. As such, Peter takes what Captain Wolf said to heart, as he swings away and tries to figure out how he can get this new side of him under control. Because, yeah, it's clear that whatever this change is, it's just, if Peter can't rein it in, it's going to take over again, and he's going to do something he will regret. He thinks he knows exactly who he can talk to about this stuff. As we cut to MIT, as Peter's back in a civilian garb, and he ends up sneaking into a lecture. And who's the lecturing professor? One Dr. Bruce Banner. And yeah, basically, since the last time we've seen Bruce in anything MCU related, he's become a professor at MIT. Also, he has both arms again. Yeah, his arm recovered after the events of Endgame. Why? She-Hulk. Yeah, I also watched She-Hulk, and I was able to get through that show before I got to this movie. And in the first episode of that show, when Bruce's cousin Jennifer wound up getting infected with Bruce's blood and turned into the She-Hulk, Bruce wound up experimenting with her blood and found that her body was actually able to absorb the gamma radiation on a much better level than Bruce was able to the point where Bruce is able to use her blood and inject it into himself, and it basically healed his maladies, gave him control of his arm again. That show also showed that Bruce also had a son from Sakaar that he named Scar, who doesn't appear in this movie, but I don't know, maybe he's off doing his own thing. I don't fucking know. I don't keep up with everything Hulk related. Point is, Bruce is okay, and like I said, he actually does. Like I said, he's doing well. He has his own class. Although plenty of his students tend to ask him Avengers-related questions. With one student even asking him the tried and true: if Thanos was concerned with overpopulation, why didn't he just use the magic gloves to make more resources in the world? Bruce's response is to have one of his students yell out Hulk smash, because why the fuck would he know that? But either way, after the lecture, Peter goes up to Bruce, and Bruce again clearly doesn't recognize him because, again, Doctor Strange spell. But the thing is, while Bruce is giving a lecture, he's not the Hulk. He's actually been human this whole time, much like how we saw him at the end of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. And the reason for that is because Bruce has developed basically a gene suppressor, something that taps into the gamma radiation in his bloodstream and basically just taps it down so that, well, he can be Bruce Banner for a while instead of the Professor Hulk. And it's actually that gene suppressor is the reason why Peter is talking to Bruce, because, well, if Peter is having trouble controlling his spider side, then he believes that with Bruce's advice, he might be able to develop a device similar to the gene suppressor that Bruce created, and actually suppress certain aspects of his spider biology, as he believes that he can use it to tap down the new additions that this change has brought on him, while still keeping his spider powers relatively intact. Of course, this brings up the moral and philosophical implications of that because, well, what do you decide what's bad and what's good? And likewise, if you could suppress some mutations in a body, couldn't you suppress all of them? You could even create a universal suppressor. But ultimately, Bruce and Peter are able to exchange enough notes that Peter does believe he knows what he's doing, and Bruce is able to figure out that Peter is not a student at MIT, though Peter never tells him that he's Spider-Man. If anything, he doesn't even introduce himself as Peter Parker. He introduces himself as Ned Leeds. But either way, Peter ends up going back to his apartment, and he and Evie begin working on a power suppressor, and all of them fail. Like, every model of power suppressor he creates just ends up overloading and blowing out. And while Peter does eventually create a model that he thinks can work, well, it only works for a little bit before it burns out too, and Peter can't figure out what's going on. As when he tries bringing it out for a field test run, again, it works for a little bit, but then when it overloads his systems, it actually causes him to shoot out a web grenade, which that's a new thing that he has, which I think is awesome, and it causes him to go running out from the alley he was training in into the streets. And from there, a random civilian spots him as he asks him if he's okay, and Peter tells him he's fine, only the person to say, yeah, you're trying to control that monster inside you. And Spidey's wondering how the hell this guy knows that. Yeah, it's the presence. It's that presence, that mental whatever it is. As yeah, during the battle with Scorpion, this presence was able to see Peter basically hulking out, as we're gonna call it. So it knows that Peter is clearly dealing with some shit, and so Peter demands to know what the hell this thing is. But whatever this thing is, it's tight-lipped. It doesn't want to tell Peter, as it doesn't really have a reason to want to talk to Peter because, well, he's working with Damage Control, who this presence claims seems to be an organization that's determined to gather anything and anyone that's deemed different or weird and lock it away. Which Peter just brushes off because they're one of the good guys, but Peter ends up getting very angry and upset with this presence, as he even webs up the guy that it's talking through and demands to know what it wants, and he even shows that he's learned enough about this thing to know it's after something called VMAX. And what I love is that when Peter says that, the presence goes from cocky and arrogant to actually shocked, like, wait, you know about that? It's found something akin to a lead, but again, Peter knows just as much as the presence does. He doesn't know what VMAX is, and anyone he's asked about it has just kind of given him nothing. Again, it's thirsty, sue me. But the presence doesn't stay webbed to the wall for long, as again, this presence can jump from body to body. And we soon learn that this thing isn't just some ethereal force. It's a person, a real live person. And it turns out that this person has been keeping an eye on good old Spider-Man, as it managed to track down where Spider-Man roosts when he's not going around kicking ass, as this person is in Peter's apartment snooping through his stuff. Hell, this person even calls out Peter by name, and when Peter wonders how the hell he did that, that person says that it found something nestled in a little coffee cup. Yeah, so remember at the end of No Way Home when Peter wanted to talk to MJ and tell her everything, but instead he decided to clam up and just go on his way? Well, before he left, MJ handed him a coffee because that's what he said he wanted. And it turns out that the speech that he was planning to tell MJ, which he wrote down, he's been keeping in that coffee cup as a keepsake, which he occasionally brings up every now and then when he remembers what he's been giving up as Spider-Man. And this person has found that, and now knows that Peter has a thing for MJ. Meaning that this person now has an open wound that it can pour salt on to get Spidey to back the hell off. As whatever VMAX is, this person wants it, and it's not going to let someone like Spider-Man get in their way. As such, our mysterious hooded figure, because they are in a hood, tells Spider-Man to back the hell off or else he'll hurt MJ. Spider-Man gives the rough equivalent of "up yours," and so this person says maybe we should ask MJ about that. We know where her apartment is. Her roommate showed it on the social media. Let's see who can get there first. But let me warn Spider-Man, I'm fast. As this person begins jumping from body to body and basically going down the street even faster than Spider-Man can keep up. As such, Spidey begins swinging throughout the city, doing his best to control his biological webs, but this person is still able to jump from body to body. But Peter is not stupid, as he's having Evie keep track of the fluctuations in bodies that this person jumps through. And eventually their chase ends up having them crash into a wedding, which is hilarious. But this person ends up jumping into more bodies until it eventually jumps into the body of someone climbing into a helicopter, and Evie is able to basically figure something out from the scans of seeing this person jump from body to body. It turns out that this person can only jump a certain distance from body to body. Now, I'm assuming that when this person recalls their mind back into their physical body, that's just instantaneous. But if they want to jump in from one body to the next, both bodies have to be at least 33 feet from each other in order to facilitate a jump. So whoever this person is, they can't just throw their mind into some random guy on the other side of New York. If they want to get that far, they gotta jump from one person, and then just basically go through a whole conga line of people until it can get to that specific person. But thankfully, with Peter figuring this out, Peter is able to do a counter strategy to try and slow this mental weirdo down. As he manages to, as this person is flying through, Spidey manages to web the helicopter into a crane, basically suspending it in the air. And well, there aren't many people within a 33-yard radius or 33-foot radius. And well, okay, you could argue Spider-Man is, but as we've established, whoever this person is, they can't jump into Spidey's mind. So hey, everything's all good. As such, this gives Spidey a bit of leeway as he manages to swing to MJ and Ned's apartment and manages to find MJ, who of course begins freaking out about Spider-Man being in her apartment, but Spidey tells her that she needs to come with him because she's in danger. And while MJ freaks out a bit, she decides to listen to the webhead and go with him as he takes her, and they swing away to a rooftop as Peter thinks that she's all good and safe, and that now that she's far enough away, he can go and deal with his presence. Only for MJ to begin wondering, why the hell is someone coming after me? And she begins putting a lot of pieces together in a relatively short amount of time, as she deduces that Spider-Man must have known her at some point, because after all, if she's in danger and because of Spider-Man, then they must have been close, and she figures out that all those times that Spider-Man saved her, they must have been friends or something, and Spidey tries playing dumb, saying, no, we never knew each other, but MJ keeps pushing until she says that she wants to know who's behind the mask. At which point she manages to lift Spidey's mask up enough to expose his lips, and the pair of them kiss. And I will admit it's a nice scene, and does drop Peter's guard enough for MJ I think Peter or MJ to fully remove the mask. I was writing notes at the time, so I don't know which one did it. But Peter is unmasked, and MJ even calls Peter by name, and yeah, it starts out as a really nice scene, as Peter does tear up and pulls MJ in for a hug because, well, he's missed her a lot, and he's happy to have her back in his life. Until MJ says, "Go on, Peter. Hold her. Hug her. It's what you want, right?" At which point Peter backs up, and yeah, it turns out our hooded mysterious figure did manage to somehow get into MJ's body. In fact, rewatching this movie, I saw the moment it happened, because when Spidey jumped into MJ's apartment, she was freaking the hell out about why Spider-Man was there, and then as Spider-Man was trying to explain it and was trying to talk to her, she just kind of went silent for a moment and went, okay. So that was the moment that this hooded figure jumped into her mind. I like that. I think that's creepy. But yeah, the hooded figure got exactly what they wanted as they begin backing up from the roof and basically walking MJ to the edge and threatening to drop. With Peter basically calling this thing a monster, because if this person knows just how much Peter loves MJ and ever felt love like that before, it wouldn't do this. So this thing's a monster. Only for MJ to respond, and I did write this line down because it was a damn good line, so hold on one second. Trying to find this. Hold on. Some people would kill to have more time with the one that... Some people would kill to have more time with the ones they love. Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I wrote terribly. It was dark. Some people would kill to spend time with the ones they love one last time. Oh, some people would kill to be with the ones they love one last time. Okay, I butchered that, but you get the whole gist. But basically, yeah, it does hint at whatever this hooded figure is after. It's not just about not just about a chemical compound or a weapon. They're doing this for someone else's sake. But Peter doesn't really give a shit, as the anger over what this person is doing to MJ ends up activating his spider instincts, and he basically grabs MJ by the neck and threatens this person to leave her body. Only for this person to struggle in Spidey's grasp and cause him to accidentally drop MJ. As such, mid-fall, this person leaves MJ, causing her to freak the hell out, with Spidey diving after her and managing to save her by grabbing her, getting under her, and shooting enough webs to break the fall, and with his enhanced durability, he can take it. But, yeah, MJ does get banged up a little bit. And when he reaches the ground, a car pulls up, and out comes a guy who's clearly controlled by our hooded figure, and basically Spidey doesn't want this person going anywhere near MJ, as he basically surrenders and says, "Please don't, I won't go after you, please just leave her alone, please." And this person seems to concede as the person that this hooded figure is possessing ends up handing Peter back his note, saying it's a nice note, a little heavy-handed, but it's got heart. And it's now that we actually get to see who the mysterious man behind the mask is, or rather, the woman behind the mask. As it turns out, the person that's been jumping from body to body and been looking for this mysterious VMAX that Damage Control seems to be hiding, it's a girl, a young girl, at least late teens, early 20s. I don't know which, but regardless, this girl is the source of all this trouble, as she has her newest puppet get back into the car that she's in the back of, and they drive away, with Peter managing to get a good look at the girl thanks to his lens. And so Peter basically is just talking out of his ass. He's not going to stop looking for this girl, but it's clear that MJ is not safe. And so, while MJ still doesn't fully understand what the hell's going on, she does know that whatever this thing is, whoever this person is, they're going to come after her again. And so, Peter realizes that she needs to go somewhere where she'll be safe. And thankfully, he does know such a place, as he swings MJ out to the docks on the outskirts of the city. And after dealing with a few deadly booby traps, we soon see who Peter is dropping her off with. Frank Castle again. While Peter and Frank tend to butt heads on the best of days because their ideologies are fundamentally clash, well, Peter really can't think of anywhere else to drop MJ, and it turns out that Frank owes Spidey one, because apparently there was an incident on Staten Island where Spidey saved Frank from being shot by a drug dealer. So, Frank does owe him one. And while Frank initially wants Spidey and MJ to hit the road, Spidey managed to talk him down by saying that she really needs help, and so Frank reluctantly allows MJ to stay in his little abode. As such, after we get some tense character stuff between Spidey, MJ, and the Punisher, Spidey ends up getting the data from his goggles as he begins trying to figure out who this mysterious girl is. And he manages to run her image through enough government backways and whatever, that he's able to finally get an ID. As it turns out, this girl was that up until 2 months ago was in the foster system, going in and out of homes, and before she suddenly vanished. And we soon learn this girl's name. Well, X-Men fans unite! This girl is Jean Grey. And yeah, my jaw dropped when that reveal came. Here's a little fun fact for all of you. One of the casting choices one of the casting reveals that was made for a Brand New Day, or was possibly leaked, was that the actress Sadie Sink had been cast for the movie. And according to some of the before movie trivia that was shown before I actually saw the movie today, when Sadie Sink accepted the role for Spider-Man, she did not know what role she was playing. She didn't even have to go through an audition process. They just said, "Hey, they have this role in Spider-Man. You interested?" And she said, "Sure." And so even she didn't know. And so when people saw her, everyone was debating what role she'd be cast for in the movie. But I think even Sadie Sink said, "You'll never guess who I'm playing, not in a million years." Okay, she probably didn't say those exact words, but basically the gist was that when you found out who she'd be playing, you'd be shocked. And she wasn't wrong, because, well, we have an X-Men now in the MCU. We're seeing another instance of a mutant finally appearing in the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Jean Grey and her mental powers. And I'm not gonna lie, I loved that twist, because in a way it makes a lot of sense. Jean Grey just learning to use her powers, mental abilities, and of course you wouldn't normally associate it with Spider-Man, because the villains in all the previous films, have been traditional Spider-Man villains. You had the Vulture and Shocker in the first movie, Mysterio in the second film, along with the Elementals. You had all Spider-Man's previous rogues come back for No Way Home. So to have the big bad of this movie be an X-Men character, I think that's really damn cool. And honestly, it's one of the few benefits that we have from seeing Disney's monopoly. Mind you, I want to also make it clear that I don't think Disney having a monopoly on a lot of the Marvel products and the studios that own them is a good thing. But if you're a comic book fan, there are some benefits to it, including finally having some fucking intercompany crossovers. As such, now that Peter has a name and a face to go with the shadowy presence, that means that he can finally start trying to figure out. That means he can finally start tracking Jean down. But before he can actually do that, he wants to try and figure out how to again suppress his spider powers because well, he can't go in there all willy-nilly. If he loses control again, things could get out of hand. So thankfully, Frank actually has the technology around for him to work on a new power suppressor, which he has the technology around because he makes bombs. And so Peter begins trying to make a new suppressor, but once again continues running into problems. Only for MJ to figure out what's going on. It turns out that the technology in Peter's heads-up display are actually electromagnetically interfering with the power suppressor. And as such, when MJ points this out to Peter, Peter begins being able to retune the suppressor, and sure enough, this one actually does work, and his powers are now back to the level they were at previously. Although MJ doesn't think that these changes in Peter are as bad as he thinks they are, and she doesn't look at Peter and sees a monster. She just sees a good man who's trying to change. Although she never calls him Peter. Yeah, every interaction they have, Peter has his mask up because he still doesn't want MJ to know who he is. But regardless, Peter continues doing work as he wants to make a new power suppressor that should hopefully be able to suppress Jean's powers completely so she won't be a threat anymore. But as Peter is doing this, we do actually have more moments between Spidey and Frank, and yeah, Frank is still going with his usual gung-ho, shoot first, ask questions, never philosophy. As when he learns that Jean is the girl that was behind that whole Humvee attack on Damage Control earlier, yeah, he basically just wants to put a bullet in her head, which Spidey is still very much against. However, they don't have a lot of time to debate that, as Spidey once again gets an alert that Jean is on the move, as she has attacked a damage control facility. Peter takes his new power suppressor and tries to go out there, with tasking Frank with keeping MJ safe, although MJ encourages Frank to go after Spider-Man because, he owes him. As such, we cut to Damage Control as Jean has managed to make her way in, as she's once more trying to access Damage Control's files to find out what VMAX is, but nothing comes up again. And throughout it all, we hear something in the facility banging on the safe, as almost all the employees in Damage Control have now hunkered down in that safe that Spidey referred to before. And whatever this thing is, it's strong enough that it's able to bash through, with Jean even getting in contact with Bill and basically saying, oh yeah, the safe door will hold, but the walls surrounding it won't. And so she basically just tells Bill that she's not leaving until she gets what she wants. And as such, Bill finally just asks her, who is she? And she tells him she's Jean Grey. But it's here when Spidey manages to arrive back on the scene, as he manages to go in, and it's clear that whatever Jean has up her sleeve, it's caused a crap ton of destruction, as a lot of Madame Control's offices are just completely smashed apart, ripped out, cinder blocks lining the walls. It's just a complete complete mess, like a bulldozer ran through here. Well, but the thing is, who is Jean controlling in order to do all this? Well, When Spidey arrives on the scene, Jean finds him, and she does meet him head-to-head, and, well, Jean reveals what the ace up her sleeve is. As when Peter goes to confront her and tries to talk her down, she throws him something. And Peter recognizes it. It's Bruce's power suppressor. At which point, Spidey is hit with a cinder block, and coming through the walls is Professor Hulk, being controlled by Jean. Of course, Peter tells Jean that she doesn't want to be in that guy's head because, it's the fucking Hulk. But Jean doesn't really give a shit, as she basically has the Hulk go and fight Spidey while she sits safely in Bill Metzger's office. As such, Spidey and Professor Hulk continue duking it out across damage control, and Jean almost gets Spidey in a chokehold, but thanks to the intervention of Frank Castle, Spidey's able to get out of that, and Spidey and Frank make a getaway. As such, As such, Spidey and Frank divide and conquer, with Spidey telling Frank to go out and try and incapacitate Jean without killing her, which again Frank's not really in the mood for. He wants to just shoot her dead. While Spidey will go and deal with the Hulk. Well, actually, I think the original plan was for Spidey to go after Jean Grey, but Frank doesn't want to deal with the Hulk, so he's going to go after the defenseless little girl. As such, Spidey continues duking it out with the Hulk, but what I love is that throughout the battle, you can see Jean fighting to stay in control, as the Hulk's will is just too strong, and at a few points Bruce actually starts resisting her and tells her to get out of his head, and Jean is actively fighting hard to stay in control, but as the battle wears on, eventually it doesn't work as the Hulk manages to throw Jean out. Thankfully, though, Jean has a backup plan, as that's when the Punisher arrives on the scene, and she throws her mind into his body. And a few of the weapons that Frank brought with him were these alien grenades that blow up, that basically cause a massive explosion. That basically cause a very massive explosion, enough to send the Hulk staggering. So she plans to just basically plant those around the safe that Bill and his cronies are hiding in order to draw them out. But back with Spidey and Bruce has reverted back to his normal self without Jean in his head, and he begins kind of freaking out as he asks, "Oh my God, what happened? Did I lose control?" And Peter's trying to calm him down, trying to get the power suppressor on him to keep him calm. But it turns out that when Jean went in Bruce's head, well, in Bruce's words, she broke something. Bruce's mind is not all there, and he can feel something crawling out. And when Bruce tries to when Peter tries calming him down, trying to help him keep control, Bruce tells him he needs to run and get out of the building. And Peter's trying to say, "No, come on, Bruce, don't let her in her head. Bruce, you gotta be in control." Only for Bruce to start changing. He gets bigger. He begins growling, and Peter says, "Oh my God, what's going on? Is it Jean? Is it the girl?" And Bruce responds with, "Not Banner, not girl. Only Hulk." Yep, we've got our savage green monster back, ladies and gentlemen, and he is pissed he sees the guy in the red and blue pajamas, and as Jean walks by in Frank's body, she tells Spidey to have fun with him before the Hulk and Spidey just start duking it out. And yes, Spidey, it's a one-sided battle, but a very fucking cool one, as the Hulk just rips apart damage control just to get to Spider-Man, and Spider-Man just has to do all of his maneuverability just to outpace the Hulk. But the Hulk is still too powerful, and even if Spidey's able to get away from him, one big sonic clap is enough to send Spidey flying, and it's a fucking mess, and the battle takes them outside of Damage Control's building, and Spidey is able to ultimately web down the Hulk by running outside and webbing him to the side of the building. But the Hulk is so strong that... Sorry, dog jumped on the bed. The Hulk is so strong that it's able to rip the chunks out of the building through the webbing, and while Peter does try putting the power suppressor on him, his skin is too thick for it to attach, so it can't do anything. And eventually, when Spidey is knocked back into the Damage Control building, he tries to fight back against the Hulk, as during the battle he grabbed one of the Shocker's gloves and was able to use it, but when the Hulk gets back in, he tries to use the glove again, only for the Hulk to smash the thing and begin trying to crush Peter's head. And the only reason that it doesn't finally go through with killing him is that Peter begins pleading to Bruce to tell him to not do this, and he even says, "Bruce, please, it's Peter. I'm your friend." And that manages to get through the Hulk enough to Bruce, as the Hulk looks at himself in the mirror, and you can tell he's not happy with what he's looking at. As such, he loosens his grip on Peter, but the chunks of the debris end up pulling him out of the building, and while the Hulk holds on, at this point he realizes he fucked up, as he lets go and willingly lets himself drop. Now, he's not dead, as later on we do see Bruce being hauled away by EMTs, and Bruce basically asks them, "Is anyone okay? Was anyone hurt? Was it just me?" And yeah, I'm just gonna say this right now, Bruce's fate after this experience is not a good one, as basically, after he was rushed to the hospital, he was rushed to a psychological facility to try and figure out what caused his break. All that goodwill thrown right down the drain thanks to the Hulk. Story of Dr. Banner's life, right? But going back to Jean Grey, the explosives that she had Frank plant do end up going off and do end up blowing up the vault. And as such, Jean ends up coming in herself with her having Frank holding Bill at gunpoint, demanding to know what VMAX, demanding to give her what she wants. But thankfully, Spidey's able to come in just in time, as he's able to smack the power suppressant on Jean, and, well, with her power suppressed, her mind gets thrown out of Frank, and now, well, she's basically just like any other girl. However, before anything else can happen, Bill ends up pulling out a tranq gun he had, and he shoots Jean, causing her to collapse. And while Spidey catches her, the last thing she says before she passes out is a name, Sarah. But Spidey can't really get more information, as after that, with Jean incapacitated, that's when the EMTs arrive, and she's hauled away. As such, Peter asks Bill if he can talk to Jean once she's all facilitated, and Bill says, yeah, he can do that, but right now they're going to try and keep her in good hands. But Peter does ask Bill about the name Sarah. Like, Jean said that before she passed it out, if it means anything to him. And Bill lies to Peter, as he tells the good Mr. Parker that before Spidey arrived on the scene, Jean got in his head, and the name Sarah was on the forefront of his mind because that was someone he used to work closely with, who sadly passed. And Jean must have picked that up from inside his head. And so Spidey hears that and just kind of accepts it at face value because he doesn't really have anything to base it on. But yeah, it's your first hint that Bill might be hiding something else. But either way, Jean seems to be taken care of, so Spidey swings back to Frank's hideout, and he meets up with MJ, only to find MJ sitting in Frank's base, looking shell-shocked. And the reason for this? She found Peter's letter to her. And yeah, MJ wants answers. And while Spidey tries playing dumb, saying that he doesn't know her really, MJ demands to see the man behind the mask. And Peter concedes. He pulls off the mask, and MJ recognizes him. Not just from the housewarming party, but from all those years ago when Peter bought a coffee off of her at the donut shop. So yeah, MJ realizes that once upon a time she and Spider-Man were dating, and he was never going to tell her. And Spidey tells MJ that he was going to tell her, but she just seems so happy, and while he knows it was wrong of him not to give her the option, at the same time, he has lost people because of his role as Spider-Man, and he didn't want MJ to be caught in the crossfire. He didn't want her to get hurt, because regardless of the situation, he loves her. Although that gets thrown in Peter's face, because despite Peter's profession of love, well, MJ doesn't really know him anymore. Literally. Yeah, she can understand why she and Spidey would have fallen in love, as the person that she's seen so far has been a noble guy. And what I love, too, is that throughout their whole time, with all the scenes they share in this movie, they still click really well. But from MJ's perspective, they've never met before now. She doesn't know Peter Parker. They barely spent any time together. And while she knows that Peter may love her, and she understands why Peter did what he did, she feels nothing for him. I mean, she doesn't hate him, but she has no love for him. There's no recognition. Just a stranger. Which, yeah, that breaks Peter a little bit too. But regardless of the situation, Jean is seemingly no longer a threat, and Peter decides to take it, and MJ wants to go home. So Peter swings her back to her apartment building, though MJ throws the dog a metaphorical bone as she invites Spidey to come up to the apartment and talk to Ned, because, well, they were best friends. She thinks that maybe Pete will want to see him. And as such, they go up to the apartment, and Ned obviously freaks out by the fact that MJ's walking in with Spider-Man. At which point, what I love is that Peter and MJ immediately think of a cover story by going, "Oh yeah, I almost fell off a subway train because I was texting on my phone and Spidey came to save me." It's so dumb. But, well, Spidey does spend this time hanging out with Ned and just, talking nerdy shit. Lord of the Rings, making Legos, Ned asking himself about being Spider-Man, including what he has to do when he has to go pee. And it's just nice. It's like despite the fact that Ned and MJ don't remember anything about Peter Parker, the three of them are just peas in a pod, and it's just nice, and it's heartwarming, it's sweet, and yeah, there's still the element of tragedy because Peter is still hiding behind a mask, but it's just nice to see the crew back together, you know? It's just nice stuff. Although halfway through the conversation, Ned leaves because he ordered a bunch of food, and, well, they're playing host to Spider-Man. They're going to make sure he leaves fat. And MJ marvels at how much Peter and Ned are just seen to be getting along, and and she even drew a sketch of them making Legos together, with her even drawing Spidey without his mask. But the conversation shifts to when MJ was being possessed by Jean Grey, and Peter mentions how he and MJ made out because Jean played with his emotions. And MJ says, "Okay, I'm glad you told me," but when it comes down to it, she doesn't remember a thing about her time with Jean. From her perspective, she was just in her room at her desk, and the next thing she knew, she was falling for her life with Spider-Man there to catch her. Which shocks Peter, because well, Bill said that she briefly got into his mind and got information. But if that were true, then that would mean he wouldn't remember that he shouldn't remember a thing. Which means that Bill lied. As such, Peter realizes that must be something else going on, and so, using Ned's laptop, he's able to get in contact with Yelena, and he basically asks Yelena if there's any relation between Jean Grey and this Sarah person. And Yelena finds it. It turns out Sarah was Jean's sister, and she had powers very similar to Jean's, but any records on Sarah Grey are scrubbed clean by damage control. Yeah, everybody puts two and two together. Damage control was holding Sarah Grey hostage and experimenting on her, so yeah, Jean just wanted to find her sister. And Peter is absolutely horrified that he basically just handed Jean over to the people who kidnapped her sister, and so he realizes he needs to make this right as he swings off to go and save Jean. Meanwhile, back with Jean, we do get a bit more clarifying details about her backstory in the MCU. Well, you see, when she and her sister developed their mental powers, they were disowned by their mother. Like, thrown right out of the house. All love and affection just gone. Mrs. Grey saw her daughters as freaks. As such, Jean and Sarah, that's what led to Jean and Sarah basically becoming victims of the system as they moved around, just were living on the streets and so forth. But regardless of everything, Sarah and Jean had each other. They helped each other as best as they could, and Sarah even helped Jean with the whole mental jumping ability. With the whole, you gotta focus on someone you can get into, and then leap through other people to get to the person you want. And it's some nice stuff, and what I love too is that we see this younger Jean is more of a wide-eyed idealist, because she genuinely still sees her mother as her mother, even though Sarah's basically telling Jean parents don't do what she did. But ultimately, they can still find some solace in each other, and Sarah decides that while Sarah and Jean are talking, and they're having a conversation in a park. That's just for context. Sarah decides to go out and get Jean some ice cream, but as she's walking to the ice cream stall, a tranq dart flies out of nowhere and hits Sarah. And as the tranquilizer takes effect of her body, who should arrive on the scene but damage control, as they immediately throw Sarah to the ground. And while Jean tries to go in to save her sister, Sarah doesn't want them to get her as well, so she uses her mental jump ability to make Jean walk away. And thus, well, that day Jean lost her sister. And from there, Jean wakes back up, and she finds herself basically tied to a chair by various shackles, and the power suppressor chip that Spidey put in her, basically hooked up to a larger machine, so that damage control is controlling. And well, Bill is there when Jean wakes up, and he's happy to see her, telling her that she's safe, she's fine, and basically marveling at just how amazing her abilities are. But they're in the hands of a child. Well, imagine what could happen if they were in the hands of someone who could really control them. And yeah, Bill's nuts. And we see further what's going on is when he leaves the room, it turns out that while it looks homely on the outside, in reality it's a glass cage that's specifically set up to basically test psychics, as the lab that controls this area is out of the 33-yard range of Jean's power, so she can't possess people. And likewise, while they do turn the power suppressor chip off, it's only after it ensures she can't do anything to them. As such, Jean has some choice questions for Bill as she continues asking him about VMAX, and Bill is genuinely clueless. Yeah, he doesn't know what VMAX is. He has no idea what it is or how it connects. But Jean explains why she's looking for VMAX. It turns out that some time ago, Sarah sent out a mental projection right into Jean's mind, and all Jean made out from it were the words VMAX. So, she thinks that maybe that's where they're keeping her sister. But, well, it's basically heavily implied that Sarah's not with us anymore. Not helped by the fact that when we look over at a desk in Jean's cell, there's a scrunchie that Sarah used to wear, meaning that Sarah used to be in this room as well. And when the damage control scientists activate the machine, which is supposed to gauge Jean's powers, Bill tells Jean that this machine was Sarah's contribution to damage control, and they're not going to let her sacrifice be in vain. And what does this machine do? It basically forces Jean to activate her powers, as it forces her to mentally project and fly around over and over and over. And Jean keeps getting a good dose of this thing as it flings her mind all over the goddamn place, and it's clearly hurting her, with the scientists upping the ante because it turns out Jean's tolerance to their tests are a lot better than Sarah's, so they think, oh, we can push it more. So, yeah, they're effectively torturing this poor girl. Meanwhile, Spidey is swinging all the way to damage control, and he ends up getting a call from the Punisher, who's... Sorry, there was a car out there. The Punisher is basically following Spidey via the Spidey tracking app because, well, he wants to go nail the girl that got in his head. And while Spidey tells Frank, no, she's innocent, she just wanted to find her sister, Frank's policy is still shoot first, ask questions never, as he still wants to put a bullet through Jean's head. As such, Spidey realizes he's got to get to damage control first, and he does manage to arrive there, and yeah, with damage control testing Jean, security has been upped, so basically everybody is just going... Basically, security forces are not letting anyone in, and while Spidey... Sorry, food. While Spidey does try coming in, well, all it takes is some damage control guards pointing guns at him, and Peter realizes there's no going in without a fight. So he proceeds to kick the damage control officer's ass and demands collective asses as he demands to know where Jean is. However, as Spidey gets into the scene, Bill is given an alert that security's been breached, so he ends up sending the Hand out to go deal with Spidey. But as this is going on, back with Jean and her testing, there is finally a break in the testing as Jean ends up basically falling back into her chair with her head looking straight up at the ceiling. And it's here where Jean finally learns what VMAX is. It's the brand name for the ventilation system in the room. Or more specifically, it's VentMax, with the vent part of the label peeled off, with only the V part still visible. Meaning that the image that Jean saw from her sister, it was her last dying breath from inside that room. And that revelation sends Jean right over the edge, as she realizes these bastards basically tortured her sister until she perished in that room. And she wants to make them pay. And in her anger, her powers begin growing, to the point where she's not just able to project her mind, she starts showcasing other abilities as she begins telekinetically moving objects. And while Bill tells the scientists to reactivate the power suppressor chip, it's not working. They're trying everything they can as Jean's powers continue growing, and the scientists keep saying, no, it's not working, until Bill says, fine, I'll do it myself. Before he can go to the computer, the scientist grabs his arm and says, no, Bill, I won't let you do that. And yeah, it's clear Jean's now talking to this guy. As she says, and this is a really good line, it gives me chills. The only hands that will wield this power are mine. At which point, she ends up sending out a psychic blast that's so great that it not only shatters the walls of her cell and the lab, but it sends out a psychic wave with damage control at its center across New York. Not encompassing the entire city, but getting a good chunk of it and causing everyone caught in it to freeze in place. Which does keep the Punisher away, because if he gets within that psychic range, he'll freeze up too. But, yeah, basically it's clear Jean's gotten a lot stronger. And the only person in this entire radius who hasn't been affected is Spider-Man, as his mind is still shielded thanks to his spider sense. But that doesn't mean Jean can't control everybody else. And Bill already sent out the Hand to deal with Spidey. So it's really just a matter of Jean exerting her will over the Hand. And sure enough, she ends up sick. As such, Peter arrives on the scene and he tries to apologize to Jean, telling her that he's sorry, he didn't mean for this. But Jean's really not having any of it. She's in full supervillain mode right now, and she wants Bill's head on a platter, and she basically just sees Spider-Man as a threat. And, well, she's not going to let this guy stop her from getting her payback on the bastards who killed her sister. So she has the Hand go after Spidey, and it's a really kick-ass battle, as the Hand is still very synchronized, and Spidey has to pull out all the stops to battle them. And while he does manage to get to the door that leads to the lab that Jean is held in, the hinges are too strong, so he can't just punch his way through. And anytime he tries to get some more traction, the Hand come in and basically stop him, with him even trying to use his webs to pull back, with the Hand cutting the webs. And while he tries climbing higher, well, it turns out that Damage Control actually has an entire unit in their labs dedicated to taking Spidey down, as they basically think that, one day he could go out of control, so hey, best to make sure he doesn't become a problem. As such, Spidey continues duking it out with the Hand, but controlled by Jean, but he's losing. They're starting to get the upper hand. They manage to smash his web shooters, and they just start beating his ass something fierce. Meanwhile, back in the lab, Jean has pulled Bill to her cell, and he's locked him in the chair and grabbed all these shards of glass with the intent of ramming them right into Bill. But back with Spidey, he's on the ground. He's bleeding, and he has to take off his mask just because he's now spitting up blood. So he is, and yeah, Jean once again hits Peter with another good villain speech, which again I gotta pull up because it's a really good one that I did write down. People are monsters. You shouldn't trust them any more than they trust you. Citing how Damage Control was playing to turn on Spidey, how there are no good people, and that monsters like this need to pay, and that they persecutes people like Peter or Jean just for being different. And when it comes down to it, Jean compares herself to Peter, stating that they have no one to turn to. And, well, as Spidey's on the ground, the hand's closing in on Peter, and I forget what Jean says specifically, but I think she does make an analogy toward change and how they are set apart from other people. And that makes Peter realize something. He can't, if he wants to win, he can't just go in with his arms tied. He needs to accept every part of him. And so, Peter goes to the power suppressor that he has on and takes it off, which in turn causes his spider side to come out. And Jean asks the million-dollar question. You have to ask yourself, who are you, Pete? Who are you? Are you Spider-Man or Peter Parker? And so as the leader of the Hand rushes at Peter, intent on stabbing him through with a katana, Spidey's eyes go black as he shoots out web and breaks the katana to pieces, saying he's both. At which point he ends up kicking the leader of the Hand right into some rails. Before one can skewer the rails, he shoots out a web and saves the leader and saves out the member of the Hand. At which point the other members of the Hand try fighting Peter, but he's now a lot stronger and a lot faster as well. This spider instinct is now different, as Peter is now fully accepting of the spider side and is now actively utilizing it on instinct, as now that he's accepted it instead of fighting it, he now has full control, as he's able to outmaneuver the Hand's weapons. He's able to withstand any attacks, while the Hand tries hitting him with sonic weapons that were developed specifically to destroy his web shooters. His new organic webs are able to breeze right through them and get him out of his hand. And how Peter is able to take down the Hand is that he rushes up to the top of the building. As the Hand flies up to get him, he jumps down and just shoots web out of his hands and just coats everything and just coats everyone in web, until he eventually is able to use his newfound strength and just burst through the door into the lab Jean's in. As such, he once more tries to talk Jean down, but Jean really is not listening. She wants Bill dead. And while Peter tries to talk her down, well, with her newfound strength, she's actually able to muster enough will to actually freeze Peter now, as she tells Peter that she's a lot stronger now. She could get into his head if she wanted to. And Peter invites her to come right in. And what does Jean see upon entering Peter's head? She sees Aunt May and Peter talking. And it's here we get a resolution on what Aunt May was telling Peter every time we revisited this scene. It turns out this was a scene of Aunt May basically telling Peter, well, his greatest power isn't all these amazing things he can do. Those are nice, but things will always change. His greatest ability is just being himself. And it doesn't matter how much things change, as long as he accepts as long as he accepts who he is and knows that he's not alone, then he'll always have something worth fighting for. And I'm butchering that to something, and I know I'm butchering that scene to hell and back. I know I'd recommend just looking up the scene yourself. It's much better than how I could convey it. But point is, Aunt May is just basically telling Peter he's not alone and that he should never ever feel ashamed of what he is. Because he's Peter Parker, and every part of him is perfect. And what I love, too, is that as the scene goes on, as Jean is entering Peter's head, she and Peter swap places. So now she's the one getting the pep talk. And she feels the full love that Aunt May has for Peter, as Aunt May pulls her in for a hug. And it's sweet. But once it's done, Aunt May vanishes and Peter sits down next to Jean, and they just talk. Jean tells Peter she's sorry for him losing Aunt May, and Peter tells Jean that he's sorry for her losing her sister, and that he knows the pain she's going through. He's been there before. But she doesn't have to face it alone. And while Jean argues that she doesn't have anyone to help her, Spidey tells her no. She's got him, as he pulls Jean into a hug. And it's a sweet scene. It's really nice as they both find camaraderie and kinship in each other. But unfortunately, this not kind moment is interrupted as Peter's spider sense goes off, and he looks to his room, which is turned into a dark void, and he hears the sound of a gun being cocked. At which point we cut to the real world, as we see that Frank found a position and was able to shoot off a sniper rifle right at damage control, intent on shooting Jean. Thankfully, Peter is able to push Jean out of the way as he takes the bullet, but it was a good shot. And the shock of seeing Peter get shot actually is able to it makes Jean pull her psychic field back in and basically release everyone she was holding, including Bill. But in a very dark reflection of what happened to Aunt May in No Way Home, Peter just says, "No, I'm fine," before he collapses as he begins bleeding out. And Jean is just horrified and going, no, Peter. And he keeps trying to tell her it's fine, that she needs to run, that they're going to come looking for her. But Jean is not going anywhere. And Frank, what I love is that when Frank realizes he shot Spider-Man, his reaction is just, oh no. But Jean is not willing to let Spider-Man die, and she tells Peter to look at her, and she uses her mental projection ability. Only this time, she's able to successfully use it on Spidey, and she keeps him breathing. At least long enough for Frank to get to damage control, and get Spidey and rush him to a hospital, where Spider-Man is immediately treated. And yeah, all of New York ends up hearing about Spider-Man's near-death state, and people are mourning. People are afraid that Spider-Man's dying, as the news reports say that he's on the brink of death, but he's still holding on. As such, Frank is being on standby, wanting to make sure that Spidey's okay, but, well, long story short, Spidey survives. The doctors at the hospital do the best that they can, and thanks to Jean's aid, she was able to keep Peter breathing until he didn't need her help anymore. And as for Jean herself, she made herself scarce, as she left Damage Control and is basically just back to wandering the world, which is a little sad, but at the very least there is a bit of a hope. There's a bit of hope there, as now she's seen the beauty in the world, and it'd be interesting to see where her journey leads her in this reality. But as for Spidey, when he wakes up in his hospital room, he finds that he's out of his suit, as the doctors had to cut him out of it. But his mask and gloves are hanging off of his bed, and surrounding his room are just all these keepsakes from all these Spidey fans, balloons, hand-drawn pictures, including the sketch that MJ drew. But there is someone with Peter this whole time, Frank. And when Frank sees that Peter's okay, he's just more than thankful that Peter's all right, and he immediately apologizes to Peter for what he did. And when Peter tries to brush it off, he's like, "No, it's fine, Frank, it's fine." Frank says, "No, it's a lot of things, but it wasn't fine. I nearly killed you, and I'm sorry. I should not have done that." Which, it's kind of a nice little reflection to the death of Spider-Man from the Ultimate Comics. But point is, Frank is regretful, and he's glad that Spider-Man pulled through. And he's now very thankful for Jean's aid, because it was because of her that Spidey was able to survive even this long. And it even gets Frank even begins getting a little touched. But now that Peter's at least good enough to walk on his own, there's still the matter of how the hell he's going to get out of this hospital. Because the thing is, outside the hospital is an entire crowd of Spidey fans who want to see the webhead to make sure he's okay. But Frank just tells Pete it's nothing to worry about, that when he's ready to go, he's got a plan. And as such, Peter manages to make his way to the hospital in civilian clothes, and Frank's plan? He puts on the spider mask and gloves and just starts posing out the window to make everyone to let everyone know that Spider-Man is okay, which, I love that. Everyone cheers for Spidey, Peter's in the middle of the crowd, and he's just thankful so many people are there rooting for him. But from there, Peter realizes that he can't go it alone anymore. He's been neglecting being Peter Parker for a while, but he has people in his corner who are ready to back him up. And Peter decides it's finally time that he start relying on people like that. As such, we get a little montage as we see Peter resting up. We see MJ. We see Jean as she's riding a bus out of town. And from there we cut to later as we see Peter back up on his feet as he's calling Captain DeWolf again and trying to basically just get everything figured out. Then basically just trying to get everything sorted out with Captain DeWolf basically telling Peter that he's got to take a rest. That he was nearly shot. He needs to stay off his feet for a while. And Peter, of course, trying to brush it off, but ultimately taking her advice to heart. And so from there, Peter once again goes to the bodega to get flowers to bring to his Aunt May's grave. But before he can go, he sees Ned eating at a table there. And so, while Peter is tempted to walk away, he goes up to Ned and he properly introduces himself, saying, "Hi, my name's Peter." And when Ned goes to shake his hand, Peter starts doing their little secret handshake, and Ned instinctively knows it. And after it's completed, Ned starts blinking as you see recognition fall over his face. And he seems to remember Peter. And, well, that's how the film ends. Well, sort of. There is an after-credits scene, which is it's basically the Spider Tracker app as it's trying to track Spidey's latest whereabouts, but it's not finding him on Earth. And as it broadens its search parameters, it starts looking beyond Earth until it locates the webhead in space. What's going on there? I personally think it's Battle World, but we won't know until a later movie. Point is, that's the end of the long-ass plot summary. An hour and a half, goddamn. So, what are my thoughts on this movie? Honest to God, it's a really damn good movie. Now, ultimately, in the pantheon of all of the MCU Spider-Man films, how do I think of it? Well, I would still rank No Way Home as the best of the MCU Spider-Man films. As well, Brand New Day is a lot new and a lot different that I think on a technical level is a lot better than No Way Home. Well, No Way Home has so much that it does right, and the highs are so high, and yes, I am stealing internet lingo from ntom64, and Tom, if you see this, I am so sorry, but you did put it rather well, and for those of you who haven't seen ntom64, go watch Hellfire Comps. He's great in that. He's great with all that stuff, but point is, the highs in No Way Home are so high that I think they just top Brand New Day. But with that said, Brand New Day I think is still a really damn good movie, and if it's not the best Spider-Man MCU film, it's at least a very close second. So, and why do I feel like this film works? Well, first off, I want to talk about the villain, Jean Grey. And honest to God, I think this version of Jean Grey is one of the most unique variants of the character that I've ever seen. Now, most versions of Jean Grey that I'm aware of tend to be more heroic versions of the character. Now, before anyone points out how Jean Grey is typically tied to stuff like the Phoenix Force and all that, and how she does sometimes have her switch flipped to evil because of that, well, generally, Jean Grey is a pretty good character. Yeah, she has her ups and her downs, her grievances and gripes like anybody else, but for the most part, she tends to be a good person, and she tends to be a regular member of the X-Men. Hell, the original X-Men comics started with her joining the X-Men team and being given the title of Marvel Girl. But there is the big difference between this version of Jean Grey in comparison to others. The X-Men. When it comes down to the MCU, they are very scarce on mutants. The only documented records in the MCU of any mutants ever appearing in the universe itself are Miss Marvel, who was revealed to be a mutant at the end of her series, and now Jean Grey. Otherwise, mutants are not a very common occurrence in the MCU, or if they are, we just haven't heard of them. And as a result of that, a lot of prominent mutant-themed superheroes or supervillains do not appear that often in the MCU, and those that we would typically associate with mutants aren't mutants. Like, to give to it with two big examples being Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. As while in the comics they're mutants, in the movies they got their powers through exposure to the Mind Stone. So clearly they're not mutants. But here we now have our first documented sighting of a mutant beyond Miss Marvel. And the thing is, because she's one of the very few occurrences of a mutant, there's no Charles Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters for her to go to. Charles Xavier is not a thing in the MCU. Or if he is a thing in the MCU, he's not as prominent as he is in other realities or in the X-Men movies. Point is, Jean Grey and most other X-Men projects tends to have a more level head on her shoulders because she has people there to guide her in the right direction. She has people there to help her. And while she does lose control sometimes, there are always going to be people in her corner who want to be by her side and try and bring her back to the light. But this Jean Grey doesn't have any of that. Rather, this Jean Grey is a scared, angry kid who just wants to find the one person in the world that she thought she could rely on. And as a result, it leads her down into making a lot of very bad decisions. Unlike the Jean Grey of the main universe, where after she was basically pushed out of her house when she developed her powers and was taken in by Charles Xavier, Jean and Sarah in the MCU didn't have anyone. They were in the foster system for years. But ultimately, even though they were ostracized and considered freaks, they still had each other and were still tried to be the support system for the other. Sorry, Chinny's dreaming over there. And so, as a result of that, while things weren't as good as they would have liked them to be, they still had someone they could rely on. Then Damage Control took Sarah Grey. And suddenly, Jean is now even more alone than she was before. She's on the street with powers that she is barely even understanding, and doesn't even know what to do, where to go, who to talk to. And then suddenly she finally gets a lead on where her sister could be. Just a simple phrase, VMAX. And she thinks to herself, if I can figure out what that is, I can find my sister. And so she goes to hell and back wanting to find that. And she does some very desperate things and puts a lot of people in danger. And Yeah, it's monstrous, but again, this is a scared kid who has had a rough life up to this point, who is desperately just trying to find the one person in her world who didn't ostracize her and who didn't ostracize her and look down on her for having these weird powers. And while she does end up clashing with Spider-Man and Damage Control, well, for one thing, Damage Control are the bastards that kept her sister hidden and are actively trying to pretend she never even existed. And Spider-Man, despite having a good heart, is the one actively working with them and is becoming a constant thorn in her side. And the thing is, she doesn't really, and because she already has a negative view of the world, she's not really in a position to tell Spidey, hey, these bastards took my sister. No, she immediately just assumes, oh, he's not going to understand. He's going to lock me up like the rest of them. I'm just going to try and find my sister because she's the only one that understands me. And yeah, that's stupid teen logic, but she's a stupid teen. I can understand that. She's just desperate and looking for the people that she thinks that she can trust and rely on. And the fact that she is constantly hit with roadblock after roadblock infuriates her to the point where she starts trying to adapt and utilize different strategies to try and get what she wants. With her breaking point finally coming when she learns that her sister is dead. And it's an understandable crash out. She lost everything, and now the one person she's been fighting to find and going through all this turmoil for is gone. Of course she's going to lose it. And quite frankly, it's a terrifying journey. You feel sorry for Jean throughout all this, but you're also scared of her because her powers are very intrusive. She can look into your mind, see everything that you can see, know everything you can know, and even the shortcomings that she has, she can find workarounds to. As yeah, she can't jump into people all across New York, but she can figure out ways to get to them. And likewise, while initially she couldn't get into Spider-Man's mind, well, he has enough activity around New York that she's able to zero in on where he lives and is able to figure out enough about Spidey in order to use the little she finds against him. And it's an effective strategy, and it's good, and it's creepy. In fact, if I can give another compliment to Jean, seeing her jump from one body to the next is fucking terrifying. It looks like demonic possession, quite frankly. Seeing someone just act so out of character and yet acting so smug and snide, it's, honest to God, really fucked up. Dry throat. Again, I love that. It really does work. But the thing is, what really helps too is not just her acting as a villain, but again her sympathetic side. So, Sadie Sink does a great job portraying Jean as this angry teenager who wants to see the world burn because it ostracized her. And it not only makes you, like I said, you feel sorry for her, but you do still feel terrified for her. And while you want to see her brought back to the light, at the same time, you want to keep a few paces away from her. You want to you don't know what will set her off. As this is this is an angry child with almost a near limitless power, and if she doesn't like you, she will basically wipe you out without a second thought. It's terrifying. And seeing her basically showing this angry side to her and refusing to accept any other viewpoint until she actually does manage to get into Spidey's head, it's just scary. And I think it really works for her. But in terms of writing too, what makes her work too is that her arc is a direct parallel to Spider-Man's. Both of them were people who were ostracized because of their abilities, who were looked down on, were treated as monsters by the general public. With Spidey, it was when he was framed for Mysterio's murder, or in the case of Jean, it was when she and her sister were thrown out on the streets by her mother. And well, both of them lost someone very dear to them. One of the few people who did accept them. For Peter, it was Aunt May. For Gina, it was her sister. And when both of them learned that the person they love most is dead, they wanted to end the life of their murderer. For Peter, it was the Green Goblin, and for Jean, it was Bill Metzger. And honest to God, seeing that parallel with Jean and Peter makes their connection work so well throughout the movie. Because seeing them want to come together, because seeing Peter be able to identify with Jean and be able to basically sympathize with her, saying, yeah, I've gone through what you've gone through, it sucks, but we don't have to do it alone, is honest to God really powerful stuff. When he learns the full truth about Jean, he wants nothing more than to save her, to bring her back, to help her get away from these people who want to take advantage of her. And it's just heartbreaking. Hold on one second. Sorry about that, I had to collect my thoughts. But what I love too is that how Pete is able to bring Jean over to the light is the same thing that kept him grounded. Aunt May. When Jean is finally able to get inside Spidey's head and sees the vision of Aunt May, I thought it worked. I loved how sad it was, because Jean finally felt the full unconditional love that Aunt May felt for Peter, and when she felt the advice that Aunt May gave, that your greatest power is to be yourself, and that people will look down on you, but you have to remember not to shut everyone out. It's great. It's sweet. It's heartbreaking. And yet also heartwarming at the same time, as Jean feels the love that she was denied for so long. And what makes it better too is that now she knows she's not alone, as she knows Peter has been through the same things she's been through, and yet he's been able to rise up above it. And even if she feels alone right now, she's not anymore. Peter's there in her corner, and he lets her know that he'll always be there. And quite frankly, it's just sweet stuff. It makes me smile. And as such, I feel like Jean's arc in this film is a really good one. Again, as a villain, it's very unexpected to see her like this, but it's honestly a welcome change that makes sense, and the arc she has throughout the movie is a very good one, making her honestly both a terrifying villain, but a very sympathetic one. And I like seeing how everything plays out with her. Likewise, Peter's arc throughout this movie is a very good one too, as his arc seems to be about accepting change and basically accepting every part of who you are, which in this case means not taking everything on by yourself. And to give an example of that, throughout they do state that when Peter starts changing and developing his more spider-like qualities, part of the reason why this hormonal change is happening is because Peter's been actively suppressing his life as Peter Parker and been more embracing his life as Spider-Man. And as such, because he's been actively denying the human part of him, the spider side is becoming more prominent, with the reason why the change happens as quickly as it does being the trauma that Peter felt when he saw MJ making out with Flash. And so what I love throughout the movie is that Peter is basically struggling to keep control, is struggling to maintain a status quo, as he believes that that in order to keep everyone he loves safe, that Peter Parker has to just not exist. Spider-Man has to be the hero. He has to be Spider-Man all the time. He needs to be able to do things as Spider-Man. But when he undergoes his metamorphosis, he begins losing control of Spider-Man, as he finds this new change to just be something abjectly wrong and hard, and something that needs to be taken care of, because when it comes out, Peter ends up losing control and ends up hurting people, because this new side of him is more violent and seems to lack any of his human qualities. And that again goes back to Peter actively denying his human side. And that I find to be a very interesting and, quite frankly, creepy take. But the arc that we see throughout the film is basically Peter learning to accept both sides, basically accept not just being Peter Parker, but also this new side of himself. And the way he does that is basically by accepting that he can't do everything alone. Throughout the entire film, Peter is trying to keep all of his loved ones at arm's length because he feels that's the best thing for everybody. He can't let MJ get in close because she could get killed like Aunt May. He can't let Ned get any close because he'd be happier without him. He doesn't even try and form any meaningful relationships, and if anything looks like that might form into a meaningful relationship, he puts even more distance between them. Peter is just a mess throughout the entire movie, and he's just constantly fighting to hold on to some modicum of normalcy and control, and failing. Ultimately, while he does try and regain some control by suppressing the changes in himself, well, that's not really control. It's actively denying a part of himself. And by denying it, it makes him weaker, quite literally, as, yeah, he gets powered down to his base level, but he's holding himself back. Not just in a literal sense, but figuratively. He's actively trying to hold on to some normalcy, and he's not willing to accept any change. But and ultimately, how everything comes to a head, and how Peter is able to start embracing everything that he is when he does finally reconnect with people. When he gets back in contact with MJ and Ned, it's like nothing's changed. Yeah, they don't know who he is, and like I said, MJ openly admits to Peter she has no idea who the hell he is. But everything just fits. When Peter and MJ are hiding out in the Punisher's hideout, they do talk, and it's like nothing's changed. Their banter is on point. They exchange ideas. MJ can match Peter's skill and notices things that he doesn't. And likewise, when Peter does meet up with Ned later on, and Ned begins questioning about Spider-Man stuff, they just start geeking out, building Legos, quoting Lord of the Rings with each other. It's just like it's like nothing's changed between them, and it's, honest to God, really sweet stuff, and it makes me smile. But ultimately, by the end, and ultimately, Peter, and again, when Peter does finally accept this other part of himself and realizes that that the only way to move forward is to basically embrace every part of him, both the good and the bad, it allows him control. And by not denying this other side of him and accepting the changes that come with it, it allows him a greater sense of power. And, well, we saw him whoop ass with it, and it was kick-ass. So I thought that was, and I honestly think it's a really good lesson. It was a story of change, acceptance, trying to find yourself, learning to open up, and likewise to accept the inevitability of change and, well, growing up. It's honestly a really good lesson, and I think it's one that definitely needs to be taught needs to be taught to a younger generation. And with Spider-Man being the guy for that, it's a nice way of basically showcasing the change with him. And again, they do that good job at showcasing that with Peter, as we see him struggling to try and maintain the status quo as Spider-Man, and yet have these other parts of his life just seep right in. I like that. It's really good. Then, of course, we got stuff with the cameos and the other Marvel characters, and quite frankly, I love Peter's friendship with the Punisher in the movie. I may not be a fan of the Punisher still, which, again, no one's fault but mine. I just don't like the character. But I like the clash of their two different ideologies. The Punisher is just a stone-cold bastard, does whatever he wants, and actively just spits on Peter's moral high ground. And yet, at the same time, it's clear the Punisher does hold some respect for Spider-Man. Not just because Spider-Man saved his life or anything like that, but because Spider-Man is good people and is the type of person that the Punisher wants to see in the world. Someone who actively will help others because it's the right thing to do. Hell, earlier in the movie when Spidey sent the Punisher flying when Jean Grey hijacked the Humvee, he said, "Oh, I'm gonna kill that kid one day." And yet, at the end of the movie, when he actually did shoot Spider-Man, he basically went, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And I like that. And what I love too is, and that's something I actually do appreciate with Frank in the movie. He's not blind to his faults. Like I said, he knows he's a bastard, and he thinks that if he could, he would not be doing all this shit. He would have his family back, and he would want to hold them in his arms. And yet, it's because he can't get over the loss of his family that he does what he does. And yet at the same time, because he knows what it's like to be in the muck, he basically looks at Spider-Man and thinks, "The fuck are you doing down here? You got people in your life who care about you. My people are gone, but you still have them. Why aren't you with them?" And I like that. And it makes for a nice little contrast between Peter and the Punisher. In a similar vein, it kind of reminds me of Deadpool with Cable or Deadpool with Wolverine. But the difference being that Spidey is actively denying these things and is basically trying to live in a fantasy world, while the serious guy is basically like, "Dude, you really need to get your head out of your own ass because you're missing the forest through the trees here." And I really like that challenge. I like the contrast, and I like that by the end of the movie, Frank is the one that has Spidey's back. Yeah, he's the one that put him in the hospital, but he's also like, I don't want this kid to die. I want to do right by him. And it does lead to some genuinely good character growth on his part as well. And then we're going to talk about other Marvel cameos. Yeah, there's the stuff with the Hulk. And yeah, that stuff kind of gets forgotten by the end of the movie, but it is a tragic turn for Bruce. And while I do like that we got to see Savage Hulk again, because he's been missing for several movies, unless you count Red Hulk, which I kind of do. Well, it makes for a much more tragic take on the character. It makes for a much more tragic turn for the Hulk, seeing him go through all this progress in all the movies, finding a balance between the Bruce Banner and Hulk personalities to the point where he actually is able to become a balanced member of society and keep himself in line. Hell, like I said, he's a professor at MIT, only to have one visit from Jean Grey basically undo all that in a second, as the Hulk comes back, and he's making up for lost time. And yeah, and I like that. Good stuff. It's ultimately a footnote in the grand comparison of the rest of the movie, but I do actually like seeing more of that stuff with the Hulk. But yeah, we got good emotional ties, good writing, and again, we got some good writing. I guess if I can give more comments to the movie, I love the pacing and the action. I love seeing Peter expanding his arsenal as Spider-Man to the point where he has his own little home base. I thought that's really cool. The action is, as always, really kick-ass. It's still cool seeing Spider-Man kicking ass, and all the fight scenes I think just look really damn cool. I loved seeing Spidey getting used to his new abilities as he was growing. I loved seeing Jean Grey use her psychic abilities, which, like I said, look creepy as fuck. I loved the emotional journeys our characters went through. There was plenty of good humor to be found in the movie too, especially with Peter and getting close to his friends, or the dynamic between Peter and the Punisher. I thought those were all really nice, and especially when Peter was getting used to his abilities. It's actually some really good stuff. And it feels like I'm rushing this. I kind of am rushing this at the end. I'm looking at the time, and I don't really want to go over 2 hours, but when it comes down to it, Spider-Man Brand New Day, I think, is a really damn good movie. It's got great action, great writing, great character set pieces for our main characters, great story, great emotional arcs. Hold on one second. Sorry, dog wanted to leave. But like I said, it's got great emotional arcs for our characters, a great villain with a great tragic backstory, some great acting all around. Quite frankly, and honestly, a really good message about acceptance, change, and embracing yourself, faults and all. I think it's just hands down a really damn good movie. Could I have done a better review of it? Probably, but honest to God, I think you just really should give this movie a shot. Like I said, in the pantheon of the MCU Spider-Man films, it's not my favorite. No Way Home still tops as my favorite MCU Spider-Man film, but Brand New Day, I think, is a very close second. It's got great action, great writing, great character growth, great humor, a lot of heart, and overall, I think it's just a damn good time. And if you haven't seen it yet, I more than recommend it. It's very much worth your time. So, yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this almost 2-hour-long video. I'm tired, I'm hot, and I need to rest, but well, as always, I'm Samuel Johnson, I'm sweaty, and while next week we'll be going back to Jimmy Neutron, the next time we venture back into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're going to see what happens when a major film studio has to entirely pivot their story when one of their regular actors turns out to be an abuser, as we take a look at Avengers Doomsday.